Something I didn't get into detail on was cleaning this deck off. Gasket spray remover will work good on this, but I wouldn't just spray it directly on it. I would spray it on a paper towel and dab it onto the deck. First thing I did on it, I made a border with a razor blade about 1/8 of an inch, and I went around and scraped all the gristle at or below the deck, by keeping my finger so it doesn't overrun on the deck into the finished area. And I went all the way around it, knocking the gristle off. Just take time. It's fine. It's for the straight edge later on. And I got that all around, and particularly on these corners. Now, that's the only place you can run a razor blade back and forth like that safely, is out of the sealing area. It's smooth. The oxidation is eating aluminum up where it's exposed to the outside, so there's no compressed gasket outside of this line per se. Well, once in a while a little sketch will get in there. But after I let that paint stripper sit on this for a half hour or so, I just took a razor blade and just drug it off in one direction. And not much weight at all. You don't want to scratch this up. The paper thin gaskets aren't too forgiving. Even though from the looks of the factory machining, it probably had 1,000-inch gouges, 1/8 inch part going across it, but the block is like really microfine scratches on it from the machining process. And it seems to hold alright without incident. I didn't see any crossover into the water jackets, the compression or external leaks. And after I got this border and drug all that stuff off, and went over a few odd places that still had some gasket paint on it, I've degreased it with a brake cleaner multiple times, hit it with a shock vac, and I took a piece of this 800 grit scuff pad and just generally doctored it up. Not any pressure per se, just cleaning the high places. And I did take this 800 grit scuff pad and went around the steel sleeves and got the carbon off of them. It'll take it better than aluminum will, but you just don't want to keep going over the same spot. 2 or 3 strokes with this and it's done. And have to shop back it off afterwards, because this is grit and you do not want it in the cylinders, and you really don't want it in the water jacket either. But essentially, well, that was all there was to it, and I got a good finish, and it's happy to be here. And it's not a cheap razor blade like those square ones. This is a utility knife blade. It's a lot tougher and more rigid, and you can just drag it across. Just don't sit there and work it back and forth, or you'll regret that. Be talking to somebody over it. It'll be going to the machine shop and getting a deck cut down or another motor. And that's how I generally use the razor blade on all the surfaces. You know, the non-critical surfaces like its timing cover is fine to scratch around on a little bit. Fine tune it with some 400 wet dry or 800 scuff pad. I've got most of the top surfaces cleaned off. Timing cover, lifter gallery, oil jackets, cylinder head decks, valley cover. I rolled the motor over. I think I'll just go ahead and take this windage tray off and check for debris on it and degrease it. It'll help the oil changes out. Start cleaning the oil pan gasket surfaces up. Still got the rear main seal to deal with. while it's here, and degrease this area and take those 10 windage tray 13mm nuts off the pickup tube that's in the middle and diagonal, goes down the back, goes over and into the oil pump. I still got a new engine mount to put on it too. I will be sticking some long pieces of paper towel down the oil jackets to keep the breeze out of them. Just make sure they don't get lost down there. You make them big enough that you know they're in there and you can get them back out. Isn't that a lovely bunch of ripe bananas? It looks alright in there, I guess. Let's see, too many debris. I'll clean that windage tray off and go from there. Again, my choice for cleaning the oil pan rails on the block was to use a razor blade and just drag the carbon off and then degrease it with brake cleaner and not scab up these back oil seal retaining cover gaskets. And degrease the block some beside the oil pan. Clean that off a little bit, and I'll probably go ahead and wipe the starter mount down some. I think that concludes the surface prep on the engine. Oil pan, deck, front timing cover. I'll deal with the water pump seals when I get the timing cover on it. So I'm going to roll the motor over on the side. I'm going to lubricate the camshaft and slip it in there. Well, I can see what's going on back through the cam bearings. I'm going to mix up some oil treatment, just like molasses, motor honey, whatever you want to call it. About a 60-40 ratio, about 60% motor oil and 40% of the stop burn for assembly purposes. This sticks to everything, stir it up real good. Keep lint and dirt away from it. The rest of the bearings and the two main ones in the back is what I'm after. This stuff will stick to the ones up front pretty good. And I'm going to lube up the cam and push it in there slowly, as level as possible, with the cam bolt installed partially as a handle. And slip it in there and lube up this front bearing and the cam. This is a factory camshaft. All the aftermarket really wants to sell is high performance ones. Put a couple bottle caps at the end of it to hold it in there. And that's brand new. I'm going to take some brake cleaner and spray the shipping wax off of it. Spray both ends of the cam out, till at least, especially the front where it starts coming out of this oil jacket in the middle of the cam here, from the actuator point. There's sure to be some leftover cuttings in there from the manufacturing process. The brake cleaner is kind of leaving oxides on it. I'm going to clean that all up, check it for any scratches on the cam bearings. Always lay your cam on something soft. As hard as it is, it gets skinned real easy. Once the cam's all lubed up, slide it in there. That last inch and a half's worse because you've got to pick it up level from the outside and just rotate it slightly as you're putting it in. real slow so you don't scratch it. But it's back in there now. There's the old camshaft bolt. Make sure it's clean before inserting it in there. And you can slip your thrust plate on there now to hold the cam back in there. I just scabbed the old thrust plate on there because I got a new one coming tomorrow, and the head gasket should finally be arriving tomorrow. It'll have some end play on it initially till the cam timing actuator sprocket's on, and you have to buy a new thrust plate. Should buy a new thrust plate, and it'll have a new surface to square those two back up. It looks pretty new and shiny back in there. Finally. That's good. Plenty of oil leaking out of the bearings. Cam's under a lot of stress from all the valve springs it's actuating. And make sure the cam spins easy enough and it's not hung up in any position. It's got some good drag on it from that stuff I put in there, but it's not hanging up anywhere. Good. I'm going to take this opportunity while I'm waiting on parts to get the oil pan cleaned up and drill these two rivets out of the gasket, an 1/8 inch drill bit, and turn on its side to keep I'm going to put paper towels in these holes to keep metal cuttings out of it, and I don't want to drill in the oil pan either. I'll plug these up and lay a paper towel on the inside there. Most of the parts have arrived, minus the valve cover gaskets and the manifold gaskets. It's all AC Delco. Cha-ching! And factory intake gaskets. They come separate and have a package for them. Now that the new thrust plate, cam retaining plate, whatever you want to call it, has arrived, I'm going to start to install it. I'm dry all four of these bolt holes out with some brake cleaner. Sure there's no grease in them. The bottom one passes through, the other ones don't. And dry this face off. Take an air hose and hit these while they're still wet. And I've got the 4 bevel headed bolts that come out of the thrust plate, soaking in some brake cleaner to degrease them. And I'll have to take a wire drill brush and clean the old Loctite off of them. I'm going to go ahead and degrease the timing chain tensioner retainer bolts holes too. The new tensioner came with 2 new bolts, and I don't think a little Loctite's going to hurt them at all. I put a drop of blue Loctite back in the holes, about halfway back in them. So it'll kind of squish out when I put the bolt in. I got that one kind of back as far as I could so it's not leaking out all over the seal. The bolts have been cleaned and degreased. The holes are degreased, and I put some oil mixture on the face of this cam and around the center of it. And I'm going to stick the plate back on there. I put a little bit on the plate. And I'm going to snug the 3 on the bottom down and then run the 4th one in. At the very center up here where the thumb's at. These bolts will tighten down to 12 foot-pounds on the 2 sides from each other first. Just kind of run them down about maybe 10 first. And I'll put a final torque of 12 on them foot-pounds. And again, make sure the cam still spins free, other than the slime mixture is dragging on it. Feels pretty good. If I was putting a new timing chain on it, I would be soaking it in oil already and letting the excess drain off, or let it soak in oil for about an hour, and then let it hang and let the excess run off of it for about an hour. But I'm reusing the old chain and sprockets and actuator, so just put it back on the way it was with just a little bit of lube on it. And a new cam actuator bolt. It is a torque to yield bolt and must be replaced anytime it's removed. I've put the crank timing mark at 12 o'clock between the 2 tensioner bolt holes. That will be with this piston on the top dead center on the driver's side bank. I'm going to slip the tensioner in there, and I'm going to put a little Loctite on those bolts. Those 2 bolts tighten down to 18 foot-pounds. I'll turn this key down, the chain's got to go through here. I'm going to grab the variable cam timing actuator and chain and the drum and hold it all together. And I got to line this dowel pin up with the hole in the back and the timing mark on the variable actuator pointing at 6 o'clock and the crank pointing at 12 o'clock. And then the pin should line up with a slot, one of the 3 slots in the back. And you'll know it's down against that, and lay a straight edge across here, and the chain shouldn't protrude out past this as a level surface. And I'll probably put some more lubrication around it, and line the guides with some of that oil mixture I've made, and a little bit on the crank sprocket. I'm sure I'm spraying the debris off of this crankshaft sprocket and crankshaft before installing the chain. Check for any debris before installing it. I'm getting my new shaft bolt out, being clean with it. I probably will put a few drops of oil in the holes and work the button a little bit and lubricate this sleeve part. If you notice, one of the holes is bigger than the other. There's 2 small holes and then one bigger one. And the bigger one will go in a dowel pin. It's sitting at about between 3 and 4 o'clock for installation. Look a little doing to get the chain past the corner of the tensioner there. I had to pick the chain up and tilt it into the block and just kind of scissor it back in there. And it finally fell into place. What a pain. Now I'll slip the chain over the actuator assembly with the timing mark lined up. I've got the timing mark in line, but the actuator's not set on the pin yet. So I'm going to have to work the crank back and forth until it drops down on the pin. It's close, it's just missing it a little bit. That didn't take much effort at all. And the timing mark's still good. And I'm going to stick the camshaft actuator bolt into the cam and run it down finger tight. And just leave it. Check and make sure the chain's back past the housing as it draws the cam up to it. Looks like I had some moderate success. Drag a razor blade over and it's not hitting the chain. It's right there. I mean, it's close to the pins, but it's actually below it. I shouldn't have very much camshaft in play. I think about 1/1000 to 4 maybe. Well, I can't feel any, so new thrust plate, new cam, put it back in business. The original had some wear on it. Noticeable, probably thousands anyway, half thousands, somewhere thousands. It's liking it. Now that's down hand tight. I'll put some oil in those holes while actuating this button and made it a little smoother action. Get it some pre-lube on. Of course, this on startup's going to be not actuated at all, so looking pretty good. I took some brake cleaner and a paper towel and wiped the inside of this pickup tube hole out on the oil pump. Got the old O-ring residue out of it. Make sure the circular mounting surfaces are grit free and clean, not scratched up. Same on the block. And I'll be putting all 4 bolts in just lightly, and then rotate the crank 360 degrees, and then tighten the oil pump bolts down to 18 foot-pounds. And that's to center the oil pump gear if necessary, especially for new applications. This worn one, I don't know if it matters so much, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let the oil pump kind of push itself around on the 4 bolts while you rotate the crank till it gets centered. I installed the oil pump, and since it's out of the vehicle, I can prime it anytime just by pouring the 60-40 mix of thick oil into the oil pickup hole before I put the tube on. And just as long as there's oil, and that thick stuff will stick to the gears enough to create suction and fill the pump up pretty quick. It's not an issue. If it was still in the vehicle, I would have turned the pump upside down and poured some of that 60-40 mix directly into the inlet and rotated the pump with my fingers till it started coming out the pressure port, and it would be lubricated and it'll take right off. That's not a problem. I've been letting the oil pan and pickup tube soak in gasoline. You want to make sure the pickup tube screen is clean, and gasoline ought to get all the residue. I've brushed it 3 or 4 times over the last day or so. Feel free to knock the front timing cover seal out, suggested replacing it, and remove the existing timing cover gasket and clean the oil pan mounting surface off. And it's generally degrease the inside of it. I wouldn't put too much stuff in this magnetic solenoid here. And might beautify the front of it, clean it up. I'll just use a big socket and put around that seal and knock it out. Mine wasn't big enough. And it looks like 1.5 inches, still too small. Yeah, one of the 3/4 inch drives, so you can just knock it out. This is a factory one. It's got a pretty good flat area to drive on. Just don't put any load on the sensors or that solenoid. I've got it supported on one end by a can and a GM water pump pulley on the face of it so the seal can fall through. It went like a lamb. Knock it from the back side forward. I'm peeling off the factory cover gasket now. It's really got a pretty good bite on it. Easy enough. I've brake cleaned the cover, wiped it out with a brush and brake cleaned it some more, and took some 400 grit and a razor blade and went around the perimeter of the sealing surface for the face of the block and the oil pan. It's doing pretty good. And I cleaned up grease buildup from the seal leaking. That seal's really hard as a brick. It'll probably crack if I keep pushing on it. It's hard. So I'm gonna make sure, be advised that this lip in here is razor sharp and will go through any cloth if you're wiping it out and get you. It is razor sharp, like a scalpel. Wow. But I'm gonna drive a new seal in there. Use a layer of piece of wood on it, the old seal or socket big enough to encompass the outer perimeter of the seal, or seal driver, whatever you got. Just something to cover it all at once after it's degreased completely. And it's fully installed when it's setting flush. Nice. It's like a Honda differential bearing, I think, for front-wheel drive Civic. Fit it pretty good. Now the prep work's done on it, I'm going to set it off to the side. Mouse over the video and hit the circle I to continue to part 2 of the video.